A clear voice sounded, instantly attracting the attention of a few people. Zhou Buyi frowned slightly. The origin chi in his hand dissipated, and the purple lightning around his body also disappeared quietly. After that, he looked at the few people who were walking towards him. Xiao Yan also raised his head and looked over. There were a total of 3 people who had come. The leader was Sang Hao, whom he had met in illusory spirit space that day. Behind Sang Hao, there was a man with a cold face. He was wearing a golden robe and looked very luxurious. His black hair was hanging loosely on his shoulders, giving him an elegant feeling. The other young man had a rough face and was wearing a short black robe. He had thick eyebrows and big eyes. His skin was bronze, and his muscles were slightly bulging. He looked very strong. "You are Sang Hao?" Zhou Buyi narrowed his eyes and spoke coldly when he saw the person who had come. "That's right. I didn't expect the #1 person in Southern Sky Academy, Zhou Buyi, to know me as well. It's my honor." Sang Hao smiled when he heard this. He cupped his hands and said, "These 2 are." Zhou Buyi's eyes flashed. He did not reply Sang Hao's words. Instead, he turned his gaze towards the 2 people behind him. "I, Wu Tiandu, greet Brother Zhou." The young man in the golden robe smiled. His smile was handsome, and he spoke in a clear voice. "I am Shi Kanghai. You should have heard of this name before. The elders of the academy have given the information of the participating students of the Star Sky to your 3 academies. Shi Kanghai's name has been specially marked as the weakest student." The young man in the black short-sleeved shirt laughed loudly and spoke with a thunderous voice. "Wu Tiandu, Shi Kanghai." He looked at the few people not far away. Xiao Yan muttered to himself in his heart. The remaining people who hadn't appeared were the 2 heavens chosen ones of Star Sky Academy, Sang Shoshan and Kang Feng. Wu Shaoqi also walked forward and stood beside Xiao Yan. When she heard their self-introduction, she couldn't help but whisper into Xiao Yan's ear, "These guys are from Star Sky Academy. They don't look weak." Upon hearing this, Xiao Yan let out a bitter laugh. Even the weakest Shi Kanghai had reached the 7th monarch emperor. He really had no idea how strong Sang Shoshan and Kang Feng, whom he had yet to meet, were. "Oh right, this is." He nodded politely at Zhou Buyi. Sang Hao suddenly looked at Xiao Yan and said with a strange expression. Being able to exchange a few rounds with Zhou Buyi was enough to prove that this guy was not simple. "Yunluo Academy, Xiao Yan." He pursed his lips. Xiao Yan said in a clear voice. Sang Hao didn't know him, but he did know Sang Hao. He had even played with Sang Hao in illusory spirit space, and had grasped Sang Hao's flaws. "Yunluo Academy?" Hearing this, Sang Hao's expression became slightly strange. Behind him, Wu Tiandu and Shi Kanghai also looked at Xiao Yan curiously. "I thought it was Mu Yuyang, but you are quite powerful to be able to exchange a few rounds with Zhou Buyi. Perhaps Yunluo Academy won't lose so badly this time." With a casual smile, Sang Hao no longer looked at Xiao Yan. He glanced at Wu Shaoqi, then shifted his gaze to Zhou Xingyue, who was standing beside Zhou Buyi. In his eyes, the Yunluo Academy had already become a grasshopper in the autumn. If he lost again after a few days, there was no more right to speak in the 4 courtyards. He wasn't afraid of Mu Yuyang, not to mention the silent and nameless Xiao Yan. As for Wu Shaoqi, although she had an extraordinary appearance, with his identity, he had seen all kinds of girls, so he naturally wouldn't pay too much attention to them. "This is the little moon of Southern Sky Academy. Zhou Xingyue, right? She's quite pretty." Sang Hao obviously attached more importance to Zhou Buyi. He smiled and looked at Zhou Xingyue, who was standing beside Zhou Buyi. The latter was as cute as a porcelain doll. Her big eyes were staring at Sang Hao with dissatisfaction. If it wasn't for these guys, his brother would definitely beat up that guy called Xiao Yan. He could also beat up that girl's pride and let out a sigh of relief for himself. Seeing Zhou Xingyue ignore him, Sang Hao gently smiled and was about to reach out to touch Zhou Xingyue's hair. "Take your hand away." Zhou Bai's eyes flashed coldly. He reached out his 5 fingers like lightning and was about to grab Sang Hao's wrist. Sang Hao raised his eyebrows and slightly exerted force in his palm. It just happened to dodge Zhou Bai's 5 fingers, causing him to grab empty air. Sang Hao retracted his palm and smiled playfully. He took a deep look at Zhou Buyi. His voice was as soft as a fly and rang in Zhou Bai's ears. "Southern Sky Academy, you are the only one who is truly powerful. The rest of you are nothing compared to Yunluo Academy. You are only slightly stronger than them. So, don't be too arrogant. After saying that, he sneered and left with Wu Tiandu and Shi Kenghai. From the beginning until the end, he didn't even look at Xiao Yan and Wu Shaoqi. One first-grade monarch emperor and one sixth-grade monarch emperor really couldn't arouse his interest. Zhou Bai's face was ashen and he didn't say anything. He looked at Sang Hao and the other two's back as they left. He silently looked at Zhou Xingyue, who was muttering to herself beside him. He thought for a while and then smiled. He touched Zhou Xingyu's hair lovingly. Are you still going to hit me? After watching Sang Hao and the other two leave, Xiao Yan looked at Zhou Buyi. He wanted to test the latter's strength. At the same time, he wanted to have an accurate estimate of his true strength. Hearing Xiao Yan's words, Zhou Bai's face instantly darkened. Just as he was about to speak, Zhou Xingyue suddenly pulled Zhou Bai's arm, signaling him not to speak. She then looked at Wu Shaoqi and said in a crisp voice, "Hey, stinky fellow. Didn't you want that brocade box? How about we make a bet?" Wu Shaoqi also had an outgoing nature in her bones. When she heard Zhou Xingyu's words, she snorted and said, "Little brat, what kind of bet do you want to make? If my brother can defeat that guy called Sang Hao first, the brocade box will belong to me. If that Xiao Yan can defeat him first, the brocade box will belong to you. What do you think?" Wu Shaoqi was at a loss for words when she heard this. Although she had a fierce personality, her mind was extremely sensitive. That guy named Sang Hao was obviously much stronger than Xiao Yan. He was even slightly stronger than Zhou Buyi. It didn't matter whether the brocade box was won or lost. If Xiao Yan was injured, she would have committed a huge crime. "What? You don't dare? Smelly bastard." Seeing that Wu Shaoqi did not speak for a long time, Zhou Xingyue giggled and wrinkled her nose as she proudly said. Although it was only the first time that she had met Wu Shaoqi, she was very interested in the latter's character, which was similar to hers, and thus she was constantly entangled with her. Regarding Zhou Xingyu's words, Zhou Buyi crossed his arms in front of his chest and did not have any intention of interrupting. As long as his sister was happy, no matter what he did, he would not frown. Furthermore, he was also interested in that Sang Hao. And very interested. Humph. What kind of lousy bet is this? It's boring. After pondering for a moment, Wu Shaoqi finally chose to give up. She pouted and was about to throw the brocade box in her hand towards Zhou Xingyue. Tap. Just as Wu Shaoqi was about to make a move, Xiao Yan's hand suddenly blocked Wu Shaoqi's hands and gently nodded at the latter. Then he looked at Zhou Xingyue and laughed loudly. "Okay. This bet. I will take it." Seeing Wu Shaoqi about to throw the brocade box over, Zhou Xingyu's eyebrows could not help but slightly frown. Just as she was feeling pity, when she heard Xiao Yan's words, her heart immediately felt as if she was smiling from ear to ear. "I did not ask you. Smelly fellow, how is it?" Rolling her eyes, although Zhou Xingyue was happy, she still pretended to look at Xiao Yan with dissatisfaction. She glanced at him and then looked at Wu Shaoqi. In her tone, there was actually a trace of hope in her voice. "Xiao Yan." Being blocked by Xiao Yan, Wu Shaoqi's brows twitched as she said hesitantly. "Perfect. I also want to know the strength of Star Sky Academy. This is also an opportunity." Hearing Wu Shaoqi's question, Xiao Yan gently smiled and mumbled to himself. "All right, I got it." Wu Shaoqi nodded and did not say anything else. Regarding Xiao Yan's strength, she believed more than doubt in her heart. "Little brat, don't cry if you lose." Wu Shaoqi looked at Zhou Xingyue with dissatisfaction and her voice was similarly clear. "HMPH. How could I lose?" Seeing Wu Shaoqi agree, Zhou Xingyue could not help but feel happy. Then she lightly snorted and grabbed Zhou Bai's arm to show off. "Big brother, you must defeat that Sang Hao." Zhou Buyi looked at Zhou Xingyue lovingly. His eyes were filled with love. When he heard the latter's words, he nodded his head heavily. "Xiao Yan, Elder Su said that Sang Hao is Lin Dao or my opponent. Will you be at a disadvantage if you fight him?" After agreeing to Zhou Xingyu's request, Wu Shaoqi was still a little worried. She looked at Xiao Yan and said, "I don't know." Xiao Yan smiled and said the truth. "Then why did you agree so straightforwardly?" Wu Shaoqi could not help but pout when she heard him and said softly. Xiao Yan smiled and shook his head without saying anything. The bet between the two girls about the brocade box was just an excuse. Whether it was Zhou Buyi or Xiao Yan, both of them wanted to know the strength of the Star Sky Academy. Sang Hao, who was ranked third, could be the most suitable opponent for them. With this sudden turn of events, Xiao Yan had no intention of having fun. The few people from the Star Sky Academy were like a heavy rock, pressing down on his heart. Zhou Buyi didn't say anything. He left with Zhou Xingyue. In his heart, he had never regarded Xiao Yan as his opponent. The onlookers who were watching the fight from afar also smiled and left when they saw Zhou Buyi leave. Every year in 4 academies competition, there would be some conflicts between the students of the 4 courtyards. They had long gotten used to it. What's inside? Waiting for the crowd to disperse, Xiao Yan looked at the brocade box in Wu Xiaoqi's hand and asked in surprise. What was it that made Wu Xiaoqi and Zhou Xingyue fight for it? This. Hearing this, Wu Xiaoqi smiled embarrassedly and stuck out her tongue to open the brocade box. Inside was actually an exquisitely made necklace. It was dazzling and dazzling. Xiao Yan had nothing to say when he saw this. This was the nature of a woman. However, he found it funny in his heart. He thought it was some kind of heavenly treasure. He did not expect it to be just a necklace. It's not easy to get here. No matter what, I have to buy a souvenir. Seeing Xiao Yan smile and not make a sound, Xiao Yan smiled. Wu Xiaoqi liked this necklace the first time she saw it. In the past, she was busy with cultivation. Now that she was a little relaxed, she naturally would not let go of all kinds of beautiful things. That's right, there was no reason to refute. Xiao Yan could only smile and look around. This was an ordinary alley in Star Moon Town. The battle between him and Zhou Buyi did not cause any noise at all. This is a strange place. Xiao Yan and Wu Xiaoqi pursed their lips and left the place. After the two of them left, in a small shop far away from here, a burly old man gently stroked his beard and watched Xiao Yan leave. His eyes flashed with a strange light. That fellow should be the little fellow who possesses 3 types of monarch flame that Elder Zhang mentioned. While the burly old man was deep in thought, a middle-aged man with somewhat white hair walked out from a small shop at the side. He leaned against a pillar at the entrance of the shop and casually said, "That's right, there are 3 kinds of monarch flames in my body. One is shaped like lightning and should be the 3000 lightning monarch flame. The other has a chaotic charm and is called the Chaos Great Monarch Flame. The last one is shaped like a water wave. It should be refining Monarch High Tianyan without a doubt." The burly old man smiled when he heard this. He directly revealed Xiao Yan's biggest trump card without making any mistakes. As expected of a sage with the title of God Eye, you can see so much with just a glance. The white-haired middle-aged man smiled and sincerely praised. God Eye. The old man smiled and subconsciously touched his right eye, then shook his head and said, "It's all in the past. It's not a big deal for a new generation to change to an old one. You're too humble. The heavenly passage God Eye is one of the 5 great God Eyes. Even now, not many people have it." The middle-aged man bitterly smiled and said in a soft voice, "Heavenly passage God Eye. After all, it's just an observant eye. I heard that in the battle domain, a young man with the tyrannical heavenly king body suddenly appeared out of nowhere. There's no one who can match him at the same level as him." The old man's expression was solemn. He mumbled to himself, "Tyrant heavenly king body? That kind of physique actually came out." When the middle-aged man heard this, his expression changed slightly. His face was filled with disbelief. This kind of heaven-defying physique was actually allowed to exist by the heavens. Sigh. The old man shook his head and did not say anything else. He raised his head and looked into the sky. Although it looked the same as the previous years, his heart had a vague feeling of heaviness. Ask the other old men to come out for some activities. Tomorrow, the major powers in the star field and the outer domains will come here to watch and make arrangements for them. Those people who don't change their nature will surely still have designs on the Star Moon Island." The old man came back to his senses and said with a serious expression, "I understand." The middle-aged man nodded and said with a similarly resolute expression. When they returned to the wooden house, the sky was already dark. As soon as they entered the wooden house, Lin Dao stepped forward and looked at Xiao Yan with a serious look. He said in a serious voice, "You fought with Zhou Buyi?" Xiao Yan's heart moved. He looked at Mu Yuyang who was beside him. The latter shrugged his shoulders and said softly, "Zhou Xingyue has been clamoring since she came back. Now the 4 major academies know about it." Zhou Xingyue. He helplessly patted his head. He had forgotten. She was also a little demoness who did not give him any worries. He probably hasn't used his full strength against you yet. It was rare for Lin Dao to have so much to say. He was really concerned about Zhou Bai's opponent. After leaving Lin Dao to think, Xiao Yan looked at Zhu Tianwo, who was standing beside him. The latter had a solemn expression on his face. He sat on the chair without saying a word. Today, after walking around Star Moon Town, he saw a few people from the other 3 courtyards. Whether it was Sang Hao and the other 2 from the Star Sky Academy, or Zhan Qingyi and the other girls from the Glaze Academy. All of them were far stronger than him, which made him doubt his own strength for the first time. Xiao Yan silently looked at Zhu Tianwo. This knot in his heart still needed to be resolved by him. Compared to Zhu Tianwo, the pressure on him wasn't any lower. After entering the room and lying on the bed, Xiao Yan's calm expression couldn't be concealed anymore. A touch of worry crept up his brows, although it was only a few exchanges. However, there was only one word that Zhou Buyi gave him: strength. He had never fought Lin Dao before. However, compared to the strength of Mu Yuyang when he fought many Monarch Emperor warriors in Silver Moon Mountain, the current Zhou Buyi, he was definitely much stronger than Mu Yuyang at that time. Zhou Buyi, Sang Hao. After repeating these names over and over again, Xiao Yan was even more unable to fall asleep. These were only students from the 2 academies. He also did not know the strength of the students from Glaze Academy. He did not know what realm they had reached. Xiao Yan. Just as Xiao Yan was tossing and turning, the voice of the Xiao Ao suddenly sounded in his mind. The voice seemed to contain the feeling of surviving a disaster. What's wrong? Xiao Yan's heart skipped a beat. When he was fighting with Zhou Buyi, the Xiao Ao didn't say a word after blocking the attack of the latter. This wasn't like the usual Xiao Ao, but when he was fighting with Zhou Buyi, Xiao Yan didn't have the time to ask. Now that he thought about it, he realized that there was something mysterious about it. Fortunately, that Sang Hao came. Otherwise, if you had fought Zhou Buyi and used the Monarch Flame, I would definitely have been discovered. The Xiao Ao let out a breath with lingering fear and said with some lingering fear. Who? When he heard this, Xiao Yan immediately sat up from the bed. I don't know, but I have a feeling that when Zhou Bai's qi was destroyed, it was as if a pair of eyes were looking at me through the void. I was so scared that I didn't dare to come out. He muttered softly. The Xiao Ao lowered its head and said weakly. That gaze was extremely strange, as if it could see through everything in the world and all living beings. Who is it? After hearing what the Xiao Ao said, Xiao Yan gritted his teeth. He instantly thought of old man Chang who was holding the bamboo fan. He shook his head and denied it. Back then, with his perfect alien realm soul, he didn't even realize how powerful old man Chang was. It shouldn't be him. There really is something strange about this place. After mumbling to himself, Xiao Yan took a deep breath. He had no choice but to lie down again. The day after tomorrow was the beginning of the 4 academies competition. He didn't know what would happen next. The next day, when the morning sunlight entered Xiao Yan's room, the latter's expression suddenly changed, and his closed eyes quickly opened. He opened the door and rushed out. He looked outside through the window. Outside the room, except for Su Ziyang and Xing Qianyue, who he had seen that day, there was also a beautiful woman in a beautiful palace dress. Her entire body was filled with a mature charm. On the other side, there was an old man with white hair and a youthful face. All 4 of them looked in the direction of Star Moon Town without exception. Xiao Yan swept his gaze across the 4 of them and looked into the distance with a shocked expression. Under his soul power, there were several shocking auras slowly approaching like a storm. As he thought about it, a flame flashed across his eyes. Xiao Yan finally saw the scene in the distance. On the surface of the ocean not far from Star Moon Island, dozens of huge warships were approaching at high speed. Each warship had a different style, but without exception, they were all incomparably luxurious. On the ship, there were all kinds of strange patterns, as if they were ancient items. Swoosh! Dozens of warships broke through the sky and arrived. In a moment, under the gaze of countless people from the Star Moon Town, all the warships slowly stopped on the island. Not far from where the warships landed, including Old Man Chang, all the warships stopped. A total of 5 people stood quietly, waiting for the people on the warships to come down. Among the 5 people, the robust old man who saw through Xiao Yan's 3 types of monarch flame was also here. The heavenly Yuan Gate of Mingan Divine Domain. The Lightning Cloud Valley in the Star Domain. The myriad sword sect from the Battle Domain is here as well. Looking at the descending warship, the 5 of them had burning eyes. From the surface of the warship, they could tell which force it belonged to. The 4 academies' competition in the star field. It had some reputation in the entire great world. Every time the competition was held, many forces would gather here and choose the best students to rope in to strengthen their own sects. Crack. As the 5 of them conversed softly, the cabin doors of the dozens of warships slowly opened. Then, many people walked out. These people were all important and powerful figures from various sects. They represented their respective sects and had the greatest decision-making power. When they took a fancy to that student in the competition, they needed to make a deal with the academy that the student belonged to before they could take him away. This was also the reason why all the academies were vigorously fostering outstanding students. The students that they took away needed to serve the sect that they belonged to within 2 years. After 2 years, they would belong to the free body. Everyone came out from their respective warships. When they saw the 5 people standing in the distance, they all went up to greet them. They had heard about this before coming here. They couldn't underestimate any old man in Star Moon Island, otherwise, they wouldn't even know how they died. This is the Star Moon Island. Stepping on the land of Star Moon Island, he murmured softly. A young man in blue clothes raised his head and looked at the town in the distance calmly. The young man had a handsome face and a heroic aura. His black hair was thick, and there was an unruly smile on his face. Haha, Yuan Error. The scenery here isn't bad, right? I was thinking that when I get old and can't walk anymore, I'll come here and enjoy the rest of my life. When that time comes, come and visit me with good wine and good meat. Next to the youth, a round old man laughed. His white beard trembled because of this. Hearing this, the young man laughed lightly. He turned to the old man and said respectfully, "Teacher, you are worrying too much. With your strength, there is absolutely hope for you to break through to the Heavenly Sovereign. Heavenly Sovereign, let fate decide." Hearing the young man's words, the old man was obviously smiling from ear to ear. He patted his big belly and said emotionally, "I don't know how many times I've been here. Although I didn't recruit a strong disciple for our sect, Yuan Error, your strength shouldn't be any weaker than any of the students in the academy." The youth lightly smiled, his eyes calm like water. "Teacher is too kind. There are also many people with extraordinary talent in the academy. How can disciple be compared to them? Sigh. Teacher, I can't do anything else, but my judgment of people is still very accurate. When old Monster Wu sent you here, you were the imperial teacher. After so many years, you have already reached the Monarch Emperor level. This kind of talent is considered the #1 in our sect. Furthermore, you have broken through to the Monarch Emperor level with the Fighting Monarch of Lower Realm. With this attitude, who among these kids can compare with you?" The old man shook his head and said with a smile. Clearly, he was very satisfied with the young man. The young man nodded his head silently when he heard this. He didn't deny it. To be able to reach this level in such a short period of time was definitely worthy of his pride. It's almost time for you to break through to the Emperor cultivation. Although this heart flame burning isn't easy to deal with, but with our stockpile, we can still get you through this. Patting the young man's shoulder, the old man said in a pleasant tone. "Thank you, teacher." An excitement finally flashed across the young man's calm eyes when he heard this. He spoke in a deep voice. "Let's not waste our time with each other." The old man patted the young man's shoulder with great force and said with great enthusiasm, "This time around, there are many big shots from the sect who have come here. Teacher will show you some knowledge and experience. When you break through to the Emperor cultivation in the future, we have to deal with these major powers. It will all depend on teacher's arrangement." The young man nodded his head and looked at the elders of the major powers around him. There was no fear in his eyes. "Brother Zhang, you're still healthy, right? We've come to bother you again." Dozens of people came to the front of the 5 men. A purple-robed middle-aged man with a thick beard walked out first. He cupped his hands towards Old Man Cheng and spoke with a thunderous voice. "This is an elder of the Heavenly Yuan sect of Mingan Divine Domain. His surname is Shu. He was once the young marquis of an empire in Middle Domain. Later, he cultivated in the Heavenly Yuan sect and his strength increased tremendously. He is no weaker than me, and he is also known as the Purple-Robed Marquis." Behind the crowd, a pot-bellied elder glanced at the middle-aged man and whispered to the youth beside him. Purple-robed Marquis, the young man looked at the middle-aged man through the crowd and deeply imprinted his image in his mind before nodding his head. As the middle-aged man spoke, the people around him, regardless of whether it was the middle-aged man or the old man, they appeared exceptionally obedient in front of the old man. No one else knew about this old man Chang. They all knew that a few years ago, an order from the heavens appeared in front of all the leaders of the various sects at the same time, and designated Old Man Chang as the host of the 4 Academies competition. From now on, everyone treated him with utmost respect. Fortunately, I won't die. Old Man Chang narrowed his eyes and swept his gaze across the crowd. He said calmly, "The 4 Academies competition has existed for many years. It is also the law set by the protectors. We are just executing it on your behalf. There is no need to bother you. Since all of you have arrived, you should rest for a day. Tomorrow, I will introduce the rules of this competition to all of you and all the students." After a pause, the old man spoke in a clear voice. "All of you have come here on behalf of your sect. Since you have come here, I hope that you will abide by the rules of this place. Don't intrude into some forbidden lands without permission, lest you offend the heavens." As he spoke, the elder pointed towards the sky, his face expressionless. That is only natural. Seeing this, everyone hurriedly expressed their stance and squeezed out all kinds of smiles on their faces. In these few days, all the inns in Star Moon Town will be open to all of you. The only thing you need to pay attention to is not to meet any of the students in advance. At the same time, we will also tell the leaders of the students to not come out again. The old man's face was cold. Facing dozens of Emperor cultivation level warriors, he didn't show any signs of being moved. We know that too. Facing the old man's cold command, none of them had the slightest bit of temper. Since that's the case, please come. After saying those words, Old Man Chang waved his hand and turned around to leave. Behind him, the robust old man glanced indifferently at everyone before turning around to leave. When the others saw this, they hurriedly followed. Woo! A trace of bewilderment flashed across the eyes of the young man beside the fat old man. He looked towards the direction of the wooden house behind the Star Moon Town. Naturally, he was extremely concerned about these so-called genius students. With this thought in mind, the young man followed the old man and followed him with big steps. 1 inch, who are those people? Within the wooden house, Zhu Tianwo impatiently asked the moment Su Ziyang stepped into the room. He could feel that all of these people had extraordinary strength. The sudden appearance of these people in Star Moon Island had puzzled everyone. Those who were watching the competition, Su Ziyang said in a concise manner. Watching the competition? Wu Shaoqi was slightly stunned when she heard this. She couldn't help but repeat herself. Mu Yuyang and Lin Dao, who were standing at the side, didn't show any signs of confusion. Compared to Xiao Yan and the other 2 who had just entered the realm and valley not long ago, they naturally knew more about the matters of the 4 Academies competition. You don't have to worry about them. Tomorrow, I will tell you the rules of this competition. During this period of time, no one is allowed to go out without permission. This is the rule of the 4 Academies competition in the past. Su Ziyang shook his head and said with an expressionless face, "It's so boring to stay here." Wu Shaoqi muttered softly. Seeing Su Ziyang frown, she immediately shut her mouth and did not say anything. Cultivate if you are bored. After yesterday's day, you should have a better understanding of the strength of the other 3 academies. You should also know how strong you are. At that time, you will not only lose face in front of so many major powers. After saying that, Su Ziyang walked out of the room and went to meet the elders of those major powers. Senior Mu, have you seen that? Kang Feng? He saw Su Ziyang leaving. Xiao Yan's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Mu Yuyang and said, "No." Mu Yuyang shook his head. "That guy hasn't shown himself since he came here. He has been staying in the house." The leaders of the 4 academies seem to be deliberately hiding their academy's strength. When the day of the competition comes, they will probably really erupt. Mu Yuyang leaned against the wooden pillar and said with a heavy voice. Xiao Yan and the others nodded when they heard this. Mu Yuyang's words were not without reason. The better Kang Feng hid his strength, the more shocking it would be when it erupted during the competition, and it would bring unexpected benefits to the Star Sky Academy. At the same time, in the place where the students of the Star Sky Academy were gathered. When Xiao Yan and Wu Shaoqi saw Seng Hao and the other 2 chatting in the main hall, a tightly shut door suddenly opened. After that, a young man with a haggard face walked out. The glaring sunlight shone in, and the young man couldn't help but narrow his eyes. He yawned and went straight to the side of the three people and sat down. "You have seen Joe Btth, right?" the young man asked while stretching his waist. "Yes, I have. His strength should be slightly stronger than mine." The one who spoke was Sang Hao. When he recalled the only time he had fought Joe Btth, a fierce look emerged in his eyes. "A little stronger than you. That means Shi Kanghai and Wu Tian shouldn't be able to defend against it, right?" Hearing this, the young man rubbed his messy hair and looked at Shi Kanghai and Wu Tiandu, who were beside him, and said, "HMPH, if we really want to fight, I don't have to be the one to lose." Wu Tiandu smiled and didn't say anything. Shi Kanghai was a bit impatient, so he said unhappily after hearing what the young man said, "Brother Shi, this time, as long as the five of us occupy the top 5 spots, Elder Xing will be able to propose a condition to the other 3 academies. This is related to the Star Sky Academy, so we can't do anything that might be risky." The young man looked at Shi Kanghai and said in a deep voice, All right. Since Elder Xing has given you all the rights to participate in this competition, I have nothing else to say. I will just follow whatever you say." Shi Kanghai shook his head when he heard this. He couldn't afford to put on such a big hat. "All right, then I'll give you a rough explanation." The young man smiled when he saw this. He tapped the table with his finger and said, "Joe Btth is the strongest in Southern Sky Academy. In our academy, since Big Brother Sang Hao doesn't think he's a match for Joe Btth, we can only let Kang Feng deal with him. The remaining people, including Lei Yunting, Liu Yanchao and Luo Zhen, I'm sure the 3 of you will be able to handle them with ease. As for Zhou Xingyue, I have heard of her in the family. She is called the little monstrous genius of Zhou clan. Although I don't know why she has such a title, but just in case, I will deal with her." Sang Shoshan's eyes sparkled as he spoke slowly. "You." Sang Hao was silent for a moment, then he said in a low voice, "Zhou Xingyue is the little princess of Zhou clan. She might have mastered the secret arts of Zhou clan. You must be careful." "Of course I know that." Sang Shoshan smiled and said, "Although you and I are only a branch of Sang clan and cannot master the secret arts, but I can't lose to her." Sang Hao nodded and didn't say anything else. Being the chosen one of the Star Sky Academy was enough to prove Sang Shoshan's unparalleled talent. Although he had the support of his family and the academy, most of it was because of his unique ability, which allowed him to reach the Monarch Emperor. I don't know much about Glaze Academy, but that Zan Qingyi is the daughter of the sect master of the Star Sector Zan City. She should be a little stronger. After pondering for a moment, Sang Shoshan blinked and said, "She is the daughter of the sect master of the profound capital in the star field. As for the Yunluo Academy, although it is going to decline soon, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse." According to the Sang clan's intel in the capital of chaos, there are 3 people worth our attention. They are Mu Yuyang, Lin Dao, and Xiao Yi. Xiao Yi? Sang Hao frowned slightly when he heard this. He recalled the time when he met Joe Btth, the young man from the Yunluo Academy. "Is there only one disciple from the Xiao clan?" Sang Hao asked after he regained his senses. "The Xiao clan has been on the verge of decline all these years. It's already good enough that there's a Xiao Yi among them." Upon hearing this, Sang Hao chuckled. There was a trace of disdain in his tone. As one of the 4 major families, the Sang clan had the tyrannical Heavenly King physique. Kang Feng of the Kang family was also the #1 expert of the Star Sky Academy. Although the Zhou clan didn't reveal its true strength, Joe Btth and Zhou Xingyu's fame was also at its peak. As for the Xiao clan, the most outstanding junior was actually ranked at the bottom of the Yunluo Academy. Yesterday, the one who fought Joe Btth was a guy named Xiao Yan. Wu Tian looked at Sang Shoshan and recalled the incident. Xiao Yan. Sang Shoshan frowned when he heard this name. He couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Behind him were the Star Sky Academy and Sang clan. He basically had all the information about the other academies in his hands. He knew a little about the 5 people from the Yunluo Academy, including Mu Yuyang, Lin Dao, and even Wu Shaoqi. However, he was a little uncertain about this Xiao Yan and the other young man. "That guy, how's his strength?" Sang Shoshan's eyes flashed with a bright light as he asked. "His strength isn't too strong. Although he can fight Joe Btth for a few rounds, he is obviously not his match." Sang Hao said as he recalled what they had seen that day. "I remember. That year when I entered the Heavenly Star, there was also a person from the Yunluo Academy who became their Saint-rank trial participant. I wonder if it was this person. Sang Shoshin knocked his head and mumbled to himself. 5. I don't think so. The Saint-rank trial participant of the Yunluo is the same level as the heavenly selection trial of the Star Sky. If Mu Yuyang and Kang Feng entered the Yunluo and Star Sky in the same year, their strength shouldn't be any weaker than Kang Feng's. Wu Tiandu continued, you and that Saint-rank trial participant entered 2 academies in the same year. You are now a 4th Dao Monarch Emperor. No matter how weak that Saint-rank trial participant is, it can't just reach the 1st Dao Monarch Emperor, right? Wu Tiandu laughed softly when he recalled Xiaoyan's strength. So, that Zhu Tianwo is the Saint-rank trial participant of Yunluo? Sang Shoshin frowned slightly. Now that Xing Qianyue wasn't here, he couldn't ask about it. Forget it. No matter what, let me handle Zhu Tianwo. Mu Yuyang, Kang Feng, you deal with Sang Hao. As for Wu Xiaoqi, you deal with her. After saying that, Sang Shoshin looked at Wu Tiandu. Wu Tiandu chuckled when he saw this. He nodded without saying anything. Both of their surnames were Wu. This was quite interesting. Xiao Yan will belong to Shi Kanghai. Even if he is the Saint-rank trial participant, it doesn't matter. He is only a Monarch Emperor. I'm afraid that he can only display the true strength of 7 Monarch Emperor. To you, 7 Monarch Emperors shouldn't be a problem at all. Upon hearing this, Shi Kanghai grinned and said, of course. Quote, 0 inches Kang Feng, how's your cultivation going? When Sang Shoshin finished analyzing the situation, Shi Kanghai suddenly saw something. He looked at a door that had been shut tightly. This fellow had been cultivating in seclusion ever since he came here. He had completely regarded this place as his great cultivation formation. He wants to use this opportunity to find an opportunity to break through. If he succeeds, he will be the first student in the history of Star Sky Academy to break through to the Emperor cultivation. This is a first-class honor that will be passed down from generation to generation in the history of Star Sky Academy. After taking Sang Shoshin's words, Wu Tiandu suddenly let out a cold laugh. There was a trace of helplessness in his eyes. This guy was too powerful. With the help of the Kang family, his strength had skyrocketed like a rocket. Emperor cultivation? Upon hearing these 2 words, Shi Kanghai instantly let out a soft gasp, then laughed loudly and said, if I can really break through to the Emperor cultivation, all the students here might not even be able to defeat me even if they joined hands. With his strength, this time, he will definitely be the first. I just don't know what kind of power he, who has such high standards, will choose to serve. Wu Tiandu muttered to himself. Faction? The Kang clan is such a large clan waiting for him to take over. Why would he take a fancy to other forces? Sang Hao laughed when he heard this. As a disciple of one of the 4 major families, he had a pretty good understanding of Kang Feng. No, big brother, you are wrong. Sang Shoshin smiled and shook his head. The 2 of us are branch family members of the Sang clan. Just now, we were envious of the position of patriarch. However, Kang Feng is the eldest son of the Kang family. He might not have any thoughts about the position of patriarch with Sang Yu. Sang Shoshin felt a great pressure in his heart when he thought of the domineering man whom he had met once before. This pressure was far from what Kang Feng or the other elders of the academy could give. Sang Yu, Sang Hao muttered to himself and did not speak anymore. In the Sang clan, this name had become a symbol of strength. Even in the battle domain where there was no limit to killing, the owner of this name was proud of everyone. The entanglement of the 4 major families has been going on for a long time. If the Sang clan can produce a peerless genius like Sang Yu, he might be able to regain his former glory. When he thought of the words of that mysterious expert in illusory spirit space, Sang Hao felt a surge of excitement in his heart. If the Sang clan were to prosper, there would be a place for them even in the great world. If that's the case, we must win this competition. Taking a deep breath, Sang Hao said in a deep voice. His eyes were filled with intense fighting spirit. Although he and Sang Shoshin were both from the side branch of the Sang clan, their blood relation was already rather thin. Now, the latter was the chosen one of the Star Sky Academy. If his faction wanted to rise in the Sang clan, they must become famous in this competition that everyone was paying attention to. In an ordinary inn in Star Moon Town, the young man who came with the fat old man stood straight in front of the window. He looked at the undulating mountain range in the distance and was silent for a moment. Finally, he spoke. "Teacher, what is the taboo of Star Moon Island?" The fat old man had just finished a meal. He was lying on the bed with a red face. When he heard the young man's words, he said, "Teacher, what is the taboo of Star Moon Island?" It's rumored that the Star Moon Island is a passageway that connects the star domain and the heavens. As for what it is, no one knows. Is the heavens the place where the star domain guardian lives? The young man had obviously heard the old man mention the star domain guardian before. When he heard the old man's words, he only nodded his head lightly. His gaze leapt over the layers of clouds, as if he had seen through the horizon. Boom! Right at this moment, a bolt of purple lightning resounded across the horizon. Immediately following that, dark clouds covered the sky, and a heavy rain poured down in an instant, blocking the young man's gaze. "It's raining." The young man retracted his gaze. His face was expressionless, but he had an indescribable feeling in his heart. The star domain guardian could be said to be one of the most powerful people in the entire star domain. It was in charge of countless sects and families in the star domain. No one could match this glory. Star domain guardian. No, from now on, I want to be the domain lord of this star field. Madness surged in the young man's eyes, and the aura within his body surged. He was practically roaring furiously in his heart. When he was in the lower realm, he was the fighting monarch. He was the ancestor of the sect, but he had spent his entire life. He hadn't been able to control the entire continent, and had been held back by a few lifelong opponents. Now, he had the sect behind him as his starting point. In addition to his incomparable mentality among his peers, he would once again display a new brilliance. Zhou Yuan's name will once again resound throughout this great world. The heavy rain outside the window was pouring, and intense sounds could be heard. Inside the house, the youth's head was lowered, and the color in his eyes was close to madness. Rumble! The furious dragon-like purple lightning resounded across the sky. The gloomy dark clouds covered the entire island. The torrential rain poured down like a waterfall. It was as though the end of the world had occurred. Crack! A few human figures flashed across the torrential rain. Their moving speed was extremely fast. In a moment, they had already left the Star Moon town and stopped at the entrance of the mountain range. The rainstorm was heavy. The moment it landed on these people, it quietly disappeared. If one looked carefully, they would find that it was one of the dozens of people who had arrived at the Star Moon Island on a warship early in the morning. Marquis Ziyi, you were the one who agreed the most at that time, but now you are the first one to come. A sharp voice was heard. The one who spoke was a charming girl. She came from the 100 Immortals Valley in the Star Domain, and her strength had reached the peak of Emperor cultivation. My wife, you are wrong. Star Moon Island has some reputation even in the great world. She isn't under the Saint Ruins of the Saint Heaven Realm's Saint Heaven Gate. I was ordered by the sect master to only come here to inspect. The purple-robed Marquise's voice was thunderous, and he did not seem to mind at all. I've long heard that the Star Moon Island is unusual. The rainstorm tonight is the perfect opportunity for us. I don't even know about those old fogies. With our strength, we can make our way through it. A thin middle-aged man said in a deep voice. The man was as thin as a stick, his eyebrows were slightly red, and his eyes were as red as blood. It was obvious that he had cultivated a special cultivation technique from the Mingan Divine Domain's Underworld Hall. Old Ghost is right. Although this is a forbidden place in the Star Moon Island, there must be something related to the heavens inside. As long as we can get one, our trip here won't be in vain. A bald man with one eye said fiercely. His remaining eye revealed endless greed. Where is the heavens? That was the place where the Star Domain Guardian was located, the Protector's place. Any one of them was enough to cause their strength to skyrocket. All right, this time, the few of us will join forces and charge in. A cold gaze looked towards the towering mountains in front of them. The purple-clothed Marquis laughed loudly. As his robes fluttered, the few of them rushed towards the mountains. Boom! Boom! A couple of purple thunderbolts flashed across the sky as the few of them charged into the mountain. They nearly tore the sky apart. At the instant the clouds overlapped, a vague shadow of a huge formation flashed and disappeared. Sigh. At the same time, Old Man Chang, who was far away in Star Moon Town, slowly opened his eyes. His eyebrows trembled slightly and he let out a long sigh. He stood up from the bamboo chair and slowly walked to the window. He looked at the pouring rain and did not say anything. The night seemed to have become less peaceful with the rainstorm and the raging wind. The ink-black island seemed to be covered by gloomy clouds. The rainstorm was pouring down like the end of the world. In the rainstorm of the rainstorm, there seemed to be a few miserable screams coming from the rainstorm, which was soon covered up by the rainstorm.